All right, it is time. Let's actually build this Eisenhower COVID memorial. We can stop making videos about it. Let's make some room, go over all the parts. Give me some page turner here. All right, so let's go to the beginning here. You're going to have some face panels. Pretty much everything is made out of eighth for the actual prism pieces. The other parts are going to be some 090, so we'll go over that. You're going to be pulling these panels off the router, get them cleaned up, and then these are going to go get water jetted. But you have 1/8" panels. You've got the frame parts and pieces, mounting plates. Got your LED things here. These are all 090. We'll go over that. You've got some 063 white. Got some Corel. I believe is Arctic ice is what we used on the Morningside letters. This is essentially the same thing, 1/2" Corel. So work out with Jim where to order that. We got some 3/16 white acrylic. That's for the backup behind the stars. And we have 090. This is what I'm calling the Creation Cradle trademark. Copyright 2021. Install template. You guys have already done that theoretically. And these files here are just for WaterJet. These are how they're going to lay out the stars. So not really for you. So let's go over. Got a lot of stuff going on here. So we'll just break it down bit by bit. So again, you're going to have these face panels going to come off the router. I imagine you want to clean them up, but they're going to go get water jetted. So, but you'll have stud weld kisses, reference kisses. Do not shoot studs yet. Obviously, they have to go get water jetted first. When they come back, this is what they'll look like. You'll have each panel will be numbered. You'll have arrow for top, and each panel is going to have an 045 groove in it, and that denotes the face side. So each of these panels is unique, just so you kind of know what's going on. You know, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So each one is grouped together, 1 and 2, 3, and 4. So just make sure they stay together, and that'll be it for the faces. Once the faces come back from WaterJet, then yeah, go ahead and shoot studs, and they'll be ready to assemble. So then you can leave them just as is once you shoot studs. So that kind of takes care of the faces. While the faces are out, you can put together the LED parts. Pretty simple. Just bend them up 1 and 2. Each spar faces each other. Similar to here. So the flange faces in. And then you're just going to rivet together the white to the 09. It's a 45 bend flange there. And then I kind of have it laid out. You're going to pack those tetras in there, the GE product, nice and tight to try to get as much light in there and try to keep it as even as possible to try to push through this thick 1/2" Corel face. So kind of how I have them laid out there. But a lot of this will also be experimental. So we're going to have to sort of trial and error and see how things light up. The other little piece, this little nugget here, is just a weird shaped little piece that'll allow for a single GE edge light product, a puck. So the puck will stick to this piece of 09. And the whole idea is that all of this 09 or the LED stuff can sneak through this hole here. So in the bottom of the prism here, you'll be able to slide that up and in. And then from the bottom underneath, you'll be able to do number 10 screws to hold everything in place. So through these holes here and here. So just like that. So you'll have access to these from the bottom, and that'll hold everything in place. You'll have room for a GE 100 right here. Excuse me. And then you'll also have provisions for bonding and grounding right there. So this will sort of act as a little area to put all the primary connections in here. And then when install goes, they can slide this down when they install it and sort of keep the wires out of the way, hopefully. So we'll see how that works out. Anyway, not a lot of room to work, even though they're kind of tall and stuff, but it'll be kind of tricky. Let's see. Working our way along here, you can do the bottom plates. These are the parts that mount to the ground. So each of these just get a 5/16 steel riv nut and all 4 points there. So you'll bend it up 1, 2, 2, put your riv nuts in, and you're good to go. So these will just go directly to, you know, there's nothing else you need to do with these. These will go directly to install. Going further, so at that point, you'll bend up this part here, and you'll bend up the face frame here. And that's it for those, and they'll be ready to assemble. You have the top. The top is just the single cut piece with a little groove in top there. So the part, ironically, the part that's going to have the most moving parts to it is the creation cradle, the jig that's going to help put all this together. So we'll just start from the top down. As you can see, these things here have a top and they have a bottom. So that's kind of how the creation cradle's laid out. So this is from a side view here. You know, this is from a front view. So you'll see everything with a T is on the top side. That goes to the top of the prism. So that starts way over here. So the idea is you're going to start with this part here. This is just going to be a strengthening strut that goes across the front here, because the pie piece that goes into the top is flat. So if there's any give in this at all, then it could introduce a bow or a give to this part. So the idea is you're going to put this piece across on the outside here, and then you're going to take the next piece, which just mirrors and it flips, and it goes on the inside of this piece, and it creates a sandwich. So you'll have this rigidity piece, this piece, and then this piece, and you'll rivet all those together, and that will create this sandwich you see right here. So you'll have this flange here with a solid piece. You'll have the other part that you put on there that you can't really see it, but it's there. And then you'll have the other piece with the V in it that creates, and that flange goes this way. And then you'll rivet it all together. Now the V, the V shape here is the first spot that the face will rest on. That's why just that 090 that you introduced to the backside of this is how that V starts with the face. So that's the first ledge, if you will, this one here. So the face is in red there. Right here, this is the face that goes all the way there. So this is the first V, this 090 here. And then from there, you go ahead and do the bottom piece. The bottom piece similar. The bottom piece will have a solid bottom piece here. And then you'll take a bottom V piece, flip it around so the flanges face out from each other, and you'll go ahead and rivet this all together. And then this one gets its own custom pieces. You're going to bend these up, 1 and 2, and you're going to flip those around, and you're going to rivet those directly to the bottom so that these pieces will face into the cradle. So you can see those are in green right here. So this piece here, this flange, will stick up in, and it will be riveted from the backside of the back. So you're going to make these little substructures. You're going to make the back, bottom, or the bottom, I say, not back, but the bottom. So you'll have the bottom piece here with the V piece there, and these little pieces, and you'll have this piece here and that piece, whatever. So once the top and bottom substructures are made, now you can put the cradle together. 1 through 6 here are universal. They're symmetrical. They don't actually have numbers 1 through 6. But it's just showing that there are 6 of these and that they have to face a certain way. The idea is that the piece of 09 that creates the V, I tried to keep those as spaced out evenly as possible. So using 1, 2, and 3, making sure they face towards the top this way, and then 4, 5, and 6, make sure they face this way. So again, there is no 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They're all the same. But just make sure that they face the proper direction. That way, these V-spars are spaced evenly to give us the best chance at making this nice and even. The whole idea behind this is that this prism assembly is really, really unstable. It really has, in its own design, it has very little strength, and it's going to be a nightmare to keep even. And the idea is also, the disadvantage we have is these are going to be right there for everyone to look at. They're going to be scrutinized. People can touch them. They can look at them. And we need these things to be as art, pieces of art as possible. Usually we can put this up on a wall 20 feet away and nobody can see anything. So that's the reason why we're going overboard on this creation cradle, is to make sure that we have the best chance at making these things line up properly. and to give them the best chance at us trying to make them as strong as possible, the parts themselves. That way, you know, they have a chance of, again, if somebody's going to lean on it, if somebody's going to be dumb and stand on it so they can Instagram that shiz and they're standing on it, whatever. We got to make sure that these things are as strong as possible. So overbuilding this jig and making this jig, you know, impart as much stability and strength to it. That's the whole idea. So again, once you get these top and bottom structures made, pieces made, then you're going to go ahead and rivet this whole thing together. This whole thing rivets together. You don't need to weld. You don't need to lures anything. So you're going to take the side pieces. This is a side view here. And you're going to go ahead. That's this guy here. So keep in mind you got top and you got bottom here. So they kind of mirror each other. So you want to make sure they're faced the right way. So get the top at the top. Then shoot all your rivets all the way along. Boom, 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 boom. So that takes care of this. So now you have these ribs. And you're all good to go. Then once that's all done, then you take the bottom, which I have, I'm going to island fill all these holes so that way the rivets sit flush. So this can sit on your table nice and flush, nice and even. And you're going to rivet the bottom on to the bottom flanges here. And that way this whole unit is completely perfectly square and strong and rigid, and that way there's no torsional effect. It's not going to twist like a red vine or a Twizzler, whatever. So that way this has the best chance of being as square and accurate as possible. So then once that's all done, then you have the ability to, using these mounting screws, you can go ahead and mount this to your table. Now keep in mind, you got to make sure that once you mount it to your table, this thing isn't bent because your table's bent. So try to pick a spot on your table or try to level your table. My old table has the ability to level it. You can drop those bolts and nuts in the legs to try to level that table as much as possible. Again, you don't want any twist. You don't want any kind of bend or bow in this thing, because that way these things will come out as straight as possible. So anyway, so once this thing is created, then you're good to go. So once these come back, you got to wait for these to come back from water jet, get those faces all done. Once you have everything bent, assembly shouldn't be that big a deal. It should actually go together pretty quickly. I'm knocking on wood here. So you're going to get this guy, put the jig on your table. Now you're ready to go. So first thing you do is you're going to drop in two faces. So grab your faces with its buddy. So 1 and 2, let's say, we'll start with those. And you're just going to slide them into the to the jig. Now, you want to justify everything to the top. You're going to shove everything to the top. So the two faces you drop in, which would be these guys here, you drop them in and you make sure that they bonk to the top. I went ahead and purposely made the jig 0.02 bigger for the face, so that way you can get the thing out. Also, but I didn't want to bake in too much slop because then we lose our accuracy. And then the base face here is 0.03, and same thing with the base here. So these are up a little bit as well. So you're going to slide in your two faces and you're going to slide them forward. Now, keep in mind that the only thing supporting them are these 090 ribs. In between, it's going to be it has the ability to spread open and be gapish or whatever. So making sure that this is all right along there and making sure everything's lining up nice, I gave you these peepholes. So these are not here just to make it lighter. So you can sight through and you can see where the base is going to line up with the V notches here. So you can poke your head in there, making sure, and you're going to make sure that not only is it touching here, but it's also touching here. So the idea is that it will touch here, hit here, and be on point here and touch there. So you're going to verify that all of them are behaving themselves as they go along. And I even put circles here that will allow you to, at the end, you'll be able to verify that these are touching where they need to right here. Same thing with the top. I went ahead and put a little spy hole right here, and that's going to make sure you can look right there and make sure that everything's lining up on that first V right there. So you'll be able to see that. At which point, then once you have the two faces in and make sure they're facing the right way and everything, Your grooves obviously will be to the top, so you'll know everything's working good. Then you'll take your top pie piece. The top pie piece will then slide into the top, make sure it sits in there. And again, you'll be able to use your little spy hole here to make sure that the pie piece is coming to the end there. Maybe give it a love tap. But the idea is that it is basically lined up there. I understand it might not be super accurate. If it sticks up a little bit, make sure it's the same on both sides at least. And then we can always, feather it out, and that'll get handled when we actually, go to prep and stuff. So anyway, so then you're going to put this piece in, the top piece, at which point you'll be able to come in with a couple of clamps, and you can use a smaller clamp at the top and use a granddaddy clamp, come in and clamp that to the top, piece. So that way you make sure that this top pie piece is nice and flat. There really isn't going to be a way to clamp the faces unless you come up with something, but they're just going to have to kind of free float. But again, just make sure that you're keeping everything forward. Then the next thing you're going to do is bring in the bottom pie piece. Now the bottom pie piece is just a piece of angle, just that bent right here, the bottom guy. And that's going to come in, and then that's going to sit on these rails you installed. So that's what these rails are for. These are custom made, so that way this rail system will sit on top of right there, the pie piece there will sit, and that'll keep this 1.25 inches away and create our pocket. And once you bring that down, and again, you'll be able to sight through the hole right here, make sure it all lines up. You'll bring that down, and then you can also then bring down some clamps and make sure everything's clamped down nice. And you'll be able to clamp this to that V thing right there. Then, oh wait, well, you don't want to clamp it yet. So you'll want to bring these down after you bring in the face. Same thing here. Yeah, you don't want to clamp that yet. Getting ahead of ourselves. So bring in this pie, bring in this bottom, then you're going to bring in the face. So the face frame is here. You'll notice that this little notch here is what will support that. It'll sit right in there. So you can see that. So that'll support that. And then this whole thing, theoretically, in a perfect world, will just sit in the notch. You see right there? So you'll bring in that thing. It'll sit right in the notch. And that will sit right along in the blue right there. So theoretically, the notches in the face will be right where that blue needs to sit. So you'll bring that guy, rest him in there. I don't have it showing there, but you'll have that notch. It'll sit there and support that. And just make sure everything's tucked in nice. Then you can bring in your clamps and clamp this down, and then clamp this down, and you're good to go. At which point, again, give it bonks. Make sure everything's to the front or the top, and make sure everything's where it's supposed to be. Make sure this part here is lined up to that, because that's going to create a floor. So that bent piece comes down and touches there. So as you can see here, so that's the face there. It'll come down, bonk. And then this is the fake floor that comes down. So you want to make sure that's touching. And then you'll also want to sight, make sure everything's good. Now I gave you, let's see, there's a couple of pushers here. These will be just so you can sort of keep the face kind of crammed down against the support spars, if you will. As you can see, like here, this will be where it is. You can bring that down. And so as you weld it, you can take those things and sort of make sure that the face is where it's supposed to be. Now, this is where it's touchy, because the face is not going to be attached to anything really. So you're going to have to make sure that as you tack it, you're sort of pushing. But if you push too hard in between spars, as you can see, then you have the ability to push this out and spread the faces apart here. You don't want to do that. So it's going to be like a bit of a touch thing where you're going to want to make sure that you just sort of do it by feel and use your sense or whatever, your spidey sense. Now, if you need to copy this pusher thing, now granted, I just did this out of 090, but if you want to make it thicker, if you want to do this out of plywood, if you want to make one of these out of like 3/4 inch acrylic or something that gives you a wider, flatter thing to push with. But I'm just saying, make sure that you don't push too hard in between the spars. The idea is to push on the spars. So if you push where this V is right against there. That way it'll keep it right there. The other thing is as you tack, so you can see where you're going to tack on the front here. You're going to tack this to the face. You're going to tack this seam together. You're going to tack along here. You're going to tack all along here to the floor. You're going to attach the floor to the face. You're going to, of course, go all the way down the spine. You're going to go along the top, tack the V in place, all of that. As you can see, it's going to be a lot of heat. Unfortunately, heat is the enemy, so we don't want to put any heat in this, but we obviously have to weld it, so it's going to be a lot of heat. So you're going to really have to use your house of pain and jump around. You're going to have to make sure you distribute the heat evenly. You know that if you superheat this back, it's going to make this totally arc up. There's going to be so many pitfalls with this. So the idea is to but you have to put a lot of heat into it. You got to make sure this thing's welded together, because otherwise, like I say, this does not have much strength in its design. So we have to make sure. So what I would do is make sure you get good tacks, but I would make sure that maybe you do like a little 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch weld here. Make sure you do a 1/2 inch, 3/4 full weld here, just to make sure that this doesn't pop and then pop and pop, and then you get a zipper going or something. You want to make sure that these entry points, because stress, like a little demon, will come around and it'll enter here. If somebody sits on it, stress will enter and it will go and it will try all of your welds, and if it starts to pop one, it could zipper. So you want to make sure that somehow don't weld this thing, but somehow you have to weld it. Basically, if you could not weld it, then that would be great, but it needs to be welded, and it needs to be welded well for this thing to go together. But the more you weld it, the worse it's going to be. So again, make sure that you can, if you can somehow clamp the sides, somehow figure out how to clamp, but it's not in the way of your welding, etc., etc. You figure out the welding formula. But needless to say, this is how you're going to weld it. You want to make sure you put welds here. Obviously, you can't weld underneath here because you can't get the gun in. The gun's not going to fit. I mean, if you can, great, but I don't see it. So in order to weld the face here down, you're going to have to weld on the front, and that's fine. We're going to provision the acrylic for that, or the Corian. But you're going to weld all along where the face makes a floor, which is right here. So as the face comes down and turns, get your gun in there and weld the big faces to the front face frame and secure that floor, right? And then this right here is the flange that goes up vertical. Make sure that gets welded, and then make sure that the pie piece that you have clamped to the other part here on the bottom, make sure you go all the way around there and make sure that's completely welded. And then, of course, all the way down the spine, you need to weld these together. Again, though, make sure that these things, that they stay, where they're supposed to. Make sure they don't spread. And when you're using the V pusher, like I said, that little V pusher, make sure you're doing it on the spars. And then in between spars, don't push pressure so these don't get spread apart. So you can see where this thing has tons of pitfalls for keeping this thing square, straight, accurate, because again, people can walk up to this thing when we're done and they're going to scrutinize it and they're going to look at it and make sure that all this stuff's looking good. So good luck with that, but you get the idea. You'll also just weld across the top. I don't really show that there, but you're going to weld across the top lip as well. Where the top pie lid meets the face, you can weld right here as well. So essentially all three sides, you're going to weld along the front face there, along the front face along the top, and then all the way back down. So that's essentially it though. Once you have this thing welded together, we theoretically are good to go. So these are very straightforward things to assemble, but you can see where, as crazy and chaotic as all these pieces are, because they don't want to hold together very well. And in order to make this prism look good, you need to do a lot of front work with the jig. You have to have a lot of stability and strength in the jig, because if you're going to assemble pieces that aren't strong and aren't stable, then you need to get the stability and strength from somewhere. So you have to bring it in externally. So that's why this jig is overkill. But once you get everything lined up, it should hopefully give us the biggest chance of success. All right, enough said. So that's that. So once that's done, then like we do, I gave this face a fighting chance by putting these bars in here. So you're going to flush cut these once we're done, once you have everything tacked together and everything's sexy. cut those out, make them nice and clean and safe. And then theoretically, these are ready for paint. So again, like I say, these aren't too crazy. They're just got to make sure everything's nice, put it all up in front there. And then when it comes time to assemble, you're going to see that you're going to have a very weird profile on the Corian. So I'm doing the first step, I'm doing an island fill of 1/4 inch, and then we're going to do a 60-degree bevel. And that hopefully will be enough to give us plenty of room to both clear your welds. If you can imagine, your weld's going to be right here. And again, we don't want to grind that weld off because that's the only strength we have. So don't be afraid. Other than the heat, just be careful, but you got to put a good weld. You got to make sure you weld this face to this as strong as possible because that's all it is. There's 7/16 of metal attached to this to try to hold it together. Good luck. So make sure there's a good weld. And then this is your profile. So all in here, you can go ahead and you'll be able to silicone those in. So you'll have this profile with the notch and the bevel, and then I left 1/16 of an inch here. So that'll just sit right in there nice, and you'll have all of that room to squish. And when you go to put these faces on, it's one and done. It's permanent. So you're going to want to make sure you put plenty of silicone right here and then bring that in, and this thing will sit down there nice and hopefully just lock in. And then maybe even inject some in here and wipe it. So that way this silicone right here will act as a plug as well. So that way, this face can't come out, but also you'll have the suction power and the adhesion power of all this filled with silicone. And if you get a little bit of squish here with clear silicone, it'll probably be okay. So, but as you can see, that's it. So the face is going to have to give some structure to all of this face here. So once this is all chopped out, this, Corian face is all this thing has. And then you're going to tuck this sort of up towards the top. So as you can see, it only has it along the top and the edges. The bottom is just flush with the ground, basically. It's not going to touch the ground, but it's essentially flush with the ground. So there's no silicone or anything. I mean, you can put silicone along the bottom, but you can just wipe it. So, but anyway, yeah, the fancy treatment just goes around the edges there. And, in case, obviously, point that out to First Shop if you're not watching this. This is up. So the 3 edges with the fancy cut is top, and then the 2 edges. So, and obviously that's the back. Anyway, so that's it. So you'll do all that. What I suggest, one final thing, we're wrapping up, is before you glue these faces in, you're going to need to light one of these up. So maybe even before it goes to paint, get the LEDs ready on one of them. Go ahead and, once it's all done and assembled, you'll be able to put the acrylic in there, put the acrylic in it, and then maybe just rest this on there and fire it up and get approval. Put it on your table or put it on the grounds where you'll see it on the ground, put it on down there, and then turn out the lights or whatever. And then, get approval, take a look at it, see what this puck looks like. I kind of think that would look cool is, you got a puck here. You're going to have a lot of back glow from the face, going to be blowing a lot of light out. So, it's going to light it up, but having brighter here and then sort of maybe these guys still bright, but not as bright because the puck will be shooting up. Or maybe after this is all done, you'll have to put a puck on the top and silicone it on, make sure it doesn't go anywhere, and that will fire down. But you can do that after everything's all put together and, separate from this, you can just reach your hand in there and put a puck. Or maybe do something where it's attached to this, because if you ever need to pull it out, you're not going to be able to get to it, because once you silicone the face in, we don't want to pull the faces out. So if you do a top puck facing down, make sure then it's removable easily enough or something. Anyway, all I'm saying is you're going to have to experiment. So maybe experiment with one before it goes out to paint and have a clear, path to victory before we even get too far. Okay, so that's it. So face, make sure it's siliconed in really good. LEDs, make sure that these things are super welded, but try not to weld them at all because heat's the enemy, but make sure you put lots of heat because they need to be strong, but don't weld them. So figure that out. Anyway, I think that's it. If you have any questions, as usual, hit me up.